Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 166, I think. So you may recognize we're on Josh's channel, but I'm kind of the one heading this thing. Josh is sort of coming off of a cold, so he's gonna try to talk when he can, but he's trying to save his breath a little bit and save his voice. So I guess what we'll do is we'll kind of go around and well, now that Josh had me introduce this, I'm going to kick it back over to him anyway. well, I guess here maybe we should do this a little differently because you aren't on my channel, so I guess I should introduce myself and let you know who I am if you're not familiar. So I'm Scott with Circworks. You can find me at Circworks on most social media, Facebook, Instagram, which I haven't posted a lot on Instagram lately, but starting tomorrow, I'm going to start posting some stuff. So be on the lookout for that. And hopefully it'll stay pretty consistent for at least a little while on Instagram. But the big one is YouTube. You can find me at Circworks Art Labs on YouTube. And you can go over there. I just put out a new video it's kind of a product tour of my free comic maker starter kit. So if you've heard of that or if you haven't, either way, I kind of go through and show you everything that's in there and how to use it and everything like that. So it's getting a lot of positive response to it. So go over there and check that out, and also get your hands on the free starter kit. It's at my website at circworks.com. It's got fonts, brushes, all kinds of digital tools, and tools not just digital, because people ask this too, but other stuff. I mean, you can print some of the stuff out and use it for traditional stuff, which is sort of the topic we're going to talk about today is, digital versus traditional, or in the case of myself and the other two hosts tonight, we all kind of, we use both of these techniques in tandem, both digital and traditional, to make our comics. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. But I'm going to kick it over to Josh now and find out what he's got going on and anything he wants to promote.
Cool. Just to clarify though, like I'm kind of in the market for something free that's being given away for free. That's like a really crazy tool where I can find all the beautiful things that I need to use to make my comics. And I just can't think of where to go. Where should I go to get cool free comic assets that are being offered for free by the creator?
Well, that cold must be going to your head, because I just mentioned that you can find that at circworks.com.
That's right. Okay. You must have a cold. That's insane. It's free. You guys go check it out. So yeah, you're on my channel. So if you haven't yet, hit the bell and the subscribe button, and it will notify you every time we go live. And then you can find my comic at quarterlystories.com. You can also read it on your smartphone, Android, or like mobile device by going to topis.io and searching for Quarterly Stories, adding it to your library there. And I make a couple cents off of that. So, it's a nice way to kick in a penny or two to this crazy comic I've been making. Yeah. What about, so we also have a special guest, Pepper DeLuca, who is one of the hundreds and is also going to be in the Anthology #2, Werewolves and Unicorns. And we're kind of, until that is launching, we're going to be trying to have a member of the hundreds that's going to be in the Anthology on each Artcasters as just kind of a build up to the final Kickstarter. So Pepper, where can everybody find your work?
Hi, so you can find me on Instagram via Pepper DeLuca, at Pepper_DeLuca on Twitter, and at PepperCopia at Facebook.com for my artist page, because someone had Pepper DeLuca already on there. So I don't know if it was an older page or someone else that's not doing anything with it, but oh well. Say la vie. So yeah, that's where you can find me. I'm sorry, this is my first show, guys. I'm sorry.
No worries. Well, we'll get into our topic in a minute, but you've got sort of an interesting story. We were just talking about it as far as kind of your 100 days of making comics journey. And so you've already done it once, but yes, right now you're actually doing 2 runs at the same time. So you got to kind of relay that story again.
Yeah. So when the anthology was announced and I was a part of it, I was like so gung-ho, so ready for it. I just started one, and then they were like, so are you going to do another one on January 1st? Because that's when it's actually starting. And I was like, I guess so. So I'm in the last 10 days of my round 2, and my anthology edition is actually round 3.
And your post, because I see a lot of your werewolves and unicorn stuff too. So it seems like, because I had this question on the last episode, or maybe I don't know if it was the last episode, but I had mentioned this, and Mike's in the chat, so maybe he can clarify this. But I wasn't sure if you had to necessarily put up like daily updates for the anthology, or just the fact that you have completed the challenge once, if that was enough. I know when you do the 100 Days of Making Comics challenge, you have to give those daily updates, but I wasn't sure if the anthology worked the same way, like you had to, because I'm doing it, but I'm doing like weekly updates, but so I wasn't really sure how that worked. So I don't know if Mike wants to clarify that, but
my personal feeling is I want to post every day to keep me accountable.
Well, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Where I kind of, when there is something going on and I can do very minimum time, like you'll probably not see me post until like almost the end of the day, possibly into the wee hours of the next morning of the following day, because I work retail hours. So I have a crazy schedule.
Well, I mean, kudos to you that you're putting out as much content. I mean, just the fact that you're doing it twice, because Mike did say it's daily updates aren't required for the anthology, but yeah, I mean, I always admire that when people are just like, especially people that have day jobs and stuff, that they're still able to do this, and for you to be doing it twice 2 runs at the same time, that's crazy, but that's awesome. So
yeah, I mean, I have to produce, so I have a comic that I do with my husband. It's called Campfire Stories of Lake Kiki Poppy. It's like a homage to all those 90 kids that watch Salute Your Shorts, Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah.
All of that stuff. And it's like you take a camp setting, and at the end of the camp day, you see kids around a campfire with some camp counselors. And they're reading from a creepy ass book. And it's like all these stories that happen at the camp.
So how long have you guys been doing that? So that's a webcomic?
So it's an actual printed comic.
Okay, cool, awesome.
So we started it. We put out one last year, and issue number 2, like we've been going around promoting it, and I haven't really gotten a chance to sit down and really delve into chapter 2. It took a while to write because we had obviously disagreements about a lot of stuff. But ultimately we just went with everything that went with the story. The whole factor is the first one came out and we got really good responses, especially for the age range that we wanted. These comics are geared and directed towards children and their parents that grew up in the 90s. So I say that, but pretty much anyone that likes family-friendly horror could probably enjoy them.
Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, in some ways that's sort of the same genre. I'm a decade before you, I think, with my book, because it takes place in the 80s, but it is sort of an homage like Goonies and that kind of stuff. And I mean, there's some stuff on there that in my book that might not be totally all ages, but if you're okay with letting your kids watch like Goonies and stuff like that, you'd be okay with it. But yeah. But it's always fun, like when you pitch it and the people, the kids like it because it's it's zombies and it's kids, and the adults like it because it's like Goonies. Oh, that's cool. Or Stranger Things or whatever. So I'm sure you have kind of that same experience when you pitch it. So that's awesome.
Like for modern day kids, like we have to sit there and go, have you seen Goosebumps? If it's like the kids from the 2000s,
right?
Goosebumps at a summer camp.
Right.
I think the other one, like there's another one that someone told me a while back, and I was just like, I never even put those two together. But like everyone's like, well, everyone's now having a summer camp theme stuff, and I'm just like, why not? It's great. It's a great format to tell a story.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So and you can incorporate it into anything. Sorry if I'm bogarting.
No. That's why you're the guest. So. Okay, so that's awesome. Yeah, because I think you and I are probably kind of both sort of in that same, sort of the same market and everything. So what we wanted to, I guess the topic we want to talk about again today was digital versus traditional. Judging by your feed and everything, I see you're posting, traditional stuff. I see watercolors and everything, and hand-drawn sketches and everything, and then I see some digital process with your comic and everything. Josh has sort of kind of a hybrid method that he's kind of got down that's really interesting. Myself, I've always done a little bit of digital. Like I would always do, as far as the comic book stuff, because I do digital stuff all day long with like the other type of work I do. But as far as comics, in the past, it was mostly all traditional except for the lettering and the shading or coloring. It's my book's black and white, but I just say coloring. But with this sort of 4-page story for the anthology, I'm trying to learn Clip Studio Pro and do it digitally. And so far, I'm kind of digging it. I'm liking it. So it's a struggle at first, and there's still so much I need to learn with the software. Like certain things, it'll do something like, what do I do? What's going on here? And then eventually I figure it out and I'm on to the next thing. But as far as just the drawing and everything, and especially like the perspective tools in the software, I'm really liking it. So it's probably going to end up changing my workflow even when I go back to, my normal comic. I'll still probably do a lot of that, I think the inking and everything traditionally, because I wanted to match the look of the other stuff I've done. But so it's pretty cool. It's sort of a new experience for me, but I'm really enjoying it. So now I kind of see what everyone's talking about. All the digital people are like, why don't you use Clip Studio Pro and all this stuff. So what are kind of your thoughts? I mean, what do you gravitate to one more than the other? Do you just find that it's one is more productive, or where's kind of the line for you?
So my line is actually whatever's going to be best for the story.
Okay.
And I like a certain look. For the anthology one, I believe we talked about this off air, but I am trying to find my paper that I once printed on. It was a smooth watercolor paper that I used, and it fed through my printer like magic, and it was great. It was awesome, and I want to go back to it. I'm going to print that out and do some ink washes over it so that I can have it ready, and then I'm going to scan it back in and put I do digital lettering. I'm sorry if that offends anyone, but the thing is I suck at lettering.
Oh, I do digital
lettering so hard. And I just, I'm just going to use a font that's for free from Circworks. So it's
awesome. Are you going to use the bullpen banter?
I'm not sure yet. I haven't actually. I've been told about your stuff for many times, and I have yet to download it. So
okay. Well, yeah. So there's two fonts in it. There's three. One's bold. One there's bullpen banter, which is sort of the dialogue font, and then there's one called Ruckus, which is more like a sound effects font. And I'm working on new fonts and stuff. So I have some others. I have another pack that another kit that I'm gonna be putting out hopefully soon. But that one will be a paid version, so it'll have a lot more stuff. But there's still tons of stuff with the free version that you can do all kinds of stuff with. So that should be able to help you out. And it's they're both really good fonts for comics, obviously. So, but yeah, I do all my lettering digitally too. But I might do the method that I don't know. I think Josh does this. I know Kevin Cross does it where he actually does his lettering digital, then he prints them out and goes over them, so it looks hand done. But it kind of just follow it. It's almost like you're tracing it, so it's got that hand done look. But if you're not the best letterer, you kind of get the best of both worlds. So
yeah, that's definitely a method I use a lot. Sometimes I'll do like full out hand lettering, but most of the time I come up with a base that's digital and then work over it. And one thing I wanted to ask, when you named that font Ruckus, was that like a Wu-Tang shout out?
Not really. I was just trying to think of something like one of the things that is hard with fonts, especially like comic book fonts, because I kept coming up with these cool names, and then I go to Blambot, and then I go to Comic Craft, and they've already used the name. Like anything that has anything to do with comics. So I was surprised I didn't know when you use like bullpen or and then I just did the one bullpen banter. But like, anything big and bombastic like bada boom or whatever, that's already been taken. So I was just trying to think what's like a loud kind of crashing sound, and I just thought ruckus. So. But yeah,
because I just like anytime I hear that, I'm thinking bring the mother and ruckus.
Yeah.
Anyhow, yeah, like I think that's a good, like honestly, I think the more people who try out that method of just digitally like lettering, you don't have to be great at lettering. You kind of digitally letter and then you use it as a base to like hand letter over. You'll be surprised. Like if you hand ink, the only reason to do that is if you hand ink, but you'll be surprised at how it gels. Like it's weird, but then it all starts to feel like one piece. And then you end up with these like nice pages, like, let me see if I can pull this one up. So it's like, this is my page one.
How big your pages are.
Yeah. But I mean, that's my page one for the Hundreds anthology. So if I ever wanted to sell this thing, like people would get a literal piece of the story with all of the different, word bubbles and everything. So,
okay. Here's a question I got to ask you. And I'm surprised. Did you have something to say, Pepper?
No, I mean, it looks great. It's amazing. I know I would mess that up.
So I have a question, and I'm surprised I haven't asked you this, Josh, but or maybe you've talked about it before. So I know you do some of your sketching digitally, right?
Yeah, like actually what I'm lightboxing right now is I wish I could show it. If I hold it up, you won't see it. You kind of can through there.
Right.
But like this is all like black and whites of those sketches I post on Instagram. So I do a rough pencil in like blue.
Right.
And then I do a multiplied magenta pencil over it and then to kind of polish it up. And then I basically turn the magenta to black and then the cyan to like a gray tone, print it out. And then I have like a little bit of the looseness of the first drawing and then the tightness of the next to kind of ink over and decide on.
Okay. So I'm guessing you don't have a printer that big. So what do you print them out in sections and splice them together and then lightbox it?
Yep.
Okay.
So it's very much like the trick that you show on the hacks.
Right.
And actually I learned that I worked at this place called Lakeshore Learning Materials. It was like an educational company. And we would have to make these giant game boards for kids,
Mm-hmm.
And so to proof them, like off of our printer, we didn't have a printer that could print like game board size. So you'd print it in all these divided sections and then you'd take it on this big, like, because that place had those old school like art tables that were a full light box.
Mm-hmm.
And you place it over that, and then you basically like take an X-Acto knife and a ruler and splice it into sections to like tape together. And then, if you guys want to see that in more detail, check out the Art Hacks video.
Yeah, it's my first Art Hacks video, so you could check that out. And that I learned how to do that in my first art job. It was an architectural firm, and we had to do comps and present stuff and. When you're doing that, you have to present stuff big, and that's before there were a lot of large format printers. And even now, it's if you want to print stuff yourself, if you use the splicing method, you can't really even up close. It's hard to tell that it's been spliced if you do it right.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's pretty seamless, and then you got a nice big presentation. So.
It's a good way to do a proof too if you're like going to order posters or something and you want to see what they're going to look like at size and you don't want to invest in like buying like a proof from the printer, you can actually make your own proof and splice it. And yeah, it's a really good, it's a good little hack. But yeah, so it depends like what style I'm working in and what I kind of feel like doing. I find like freedom in both. There's something about like drawing by hand. I find that if I want to get really tight with the drawing, it's better to do by hand because I can kind of build it, but I don't overdo it. But it's weird because I think they're both kind of good options, I think I kind of agree with Pepper on the idea of just like kind of picking whatever works for what you're working on, and then hopefully staying consistent with it. Because if you kind of change your game like midway through like a graphic novel, it's like it's going to show, So in this case, the thing I'm working on now is in the style. It's like this cartoony kind of if Mary Blair took acid kind of look. And so like that makes sense for me to do digitally. It's just like I'm doing much more traditional cartooning with less photo reference. So there's less like kind of like I have to think more in terms of like simple shapes as opposed to like complex shapes. And so it's easier to do that kind of thing to me digitally. It's almost like easier to do what you do in animation, where in animation you do like one color with just the blocked out shapes and then another color over it to kind of tighten it up. It's easier to do that digitally. It just cuts out a lot of the process. So that's why I do it that way.
Yeah, I see that a lot with digital artists where they'll use like a red and a blue, and so far all my stuff is blue lines. Like here, I guess I don't know if I can pull this up or not. Let me see. Where's let me screen share here. Oh, sorry, bad. Okay, so I don't know. Can you guys see that? Or are you locked on me or on you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mine goes back and forth. Whoever's talking.
Oh, okay. I must have a thing here. I must have it wrong or whatever. Anyway, so yeah. So I mean, I've been basically blue lining everything, and I'll do it on different layers. Like the backgrounds are a separate layer from the foreground and everything. But yeah, I'm really starting to enjoy it because there's if something's a little like not the right proportion, I can scale it up or scale it down or flip things, or all the panels are all on separate layers, so I can kind of move them around, which specifically works for this comic book because it's just got all these different, I don't know, little vignettes and everything in it. So, but yeah, I'm starting to like this digital thing to the point where I'm considering maybe getting an iPad or whatever. So Pepper, you were talking about that you do some of your digital work on an iPad, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So how do you find that experience? And you said you use Procreate. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I use Procreate. There's some people who are making brushes. I'm not sure how they make brushes on that, but what I found with like just the tools that it comes with, like you can play around with them and adjust them to the way that you need them. So it kind of blends really well for digital inking, and it has a built-in video like recorder of your movements while you're in the program. So it makes it easier when you want to do a process video right after. Yeah,
that's cool. I like that idea too. So, and I've seen some of your process videos too, so I thought that was really cool. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm thinking about getting one. So do you have the iPad Pro or?
Yes, I have an iPad Pro, the 12.9 inch.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm trying to debate at first because I know like the 2018, the regular iPad has, I think it has Apple Pencil support. But people keep telling me to get the iPad Pro, so I'll have to see about that. Because at first I was like, yeah, I just don't know. I mean, it's a lot of money to drop, and I don't know. I don't want to like get one and then find that I don't really like the digital sketching. But now that I'm doing it more, and of course this has only been, hasn't been that long that I'm doing this, but so far I'm liking it. So I'm thinking that I might stick with it if I actually got one. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually, surprisingly enough, I had a Wacom tablet, not the one where you draw like directly on it and it's the screen one. Like I draw it and then I have to look up to make sure that I did it properly.
Right.
So I had been working on that one for like a long time. I've had mine, I think, a good 5-6 years before I got the iPad. Which is great. Unfortunately, like I came into this area of my life where I was like, essentially I had to switch over back to traditional artwork for a while, because every single time I tried to do digital, like my arm would just get in writhing pain. And so like, yeah, I mean, so in order to fix it, I went traditional. And that's how I was able to kind of recuperate. And now I can go back and forth. And I know when I get to a certain point digitally, I have to go back to traditional to like kind of use other muscles in my arm and my hand and my wrist and everything like that. So that's why I switch back and forth.
Okay, that's interesting. That's something we should touch on. And I just wanted to bring this up because if you guys didn't, Corey did kind of not a solo 48-hour art check, but he had a physical therapist on who was they were talking about this exact subject as far as, you know, drawing and you know, hand, like just injuries or just, you know, what you should be doing so you don't run into problems like that. So definitely check that out. But that's something we should bring up as far as kind of pros and cons, because I've also heard people say the opposite, where they say that the digital is better for them, that they have problems drawing traditionally because of, I don't know, whatever reasons, but you know, it sounds like I guess it just depends on the person or whatever way that maybe it's just whatever way you're doing it. If you're doing it long enough, you kind of get, that's where the problems arise, and just switching. I don't know if that's what it's all about, but
it's probably that, and like if you think about it, also just your method of holding your tool, you know, and like where you're putting repetitive action. So like for me, I draw mostly with my wrist, which is terrible.
Yeah, I do too. Like everyone says, "Oh, you got to draw with your whole arm and everything," but I've never done that.
Yeah, I wish I had trained myself. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was like, how can you get the details right?
Yeah,
I mean, I've seen people that do it. I mean, most like, you know, the like masters or people, like that's what they all say, is that you got to get the, you know, I don't know, but I've always kind of drawn with my wrist, so hopefully it's not gonna, you know, it's not. I mean, it seems like I keep hearing all these artists saying that they're having these issues, and I'm older than a lot of them, so I don't know how I've avoided it so far. So hopefully, you know, I don't know what it is, but hopefully I can keep it up, because yeah, I mean, I'm used to doing something a certain way, and so far I don't. Every once in a while I'll get something, but so far nothing too bad.
Yeah, like I've never had like a serious injury. I've had like minor kind of frights, you know, with it, but you know, usually nothing that like a night or two with a brace doesn't help, you know.
No, I can agree with that one. I can. Unfortunately, mine was due to the fact that I had a cyst that had to be removed in my upper right jaw, and it caused me nerve damage on my right side. Which, what I was trained, like as a child, I could go either left or right hand. So I went to Catholic school, so I was taught right-handedness of everything. So like when you're ingrained and you know everything on how to write, how to draw, how to do everything, and then all of a sudden your hand stops functioning properly, you're like devastated. I know a couple of people. I know Mike is the one that went through this as well. I never know on what to say to people that are going through it either. So it's just like I just say like good luck, or like I wish them the best, because I know it's not the easiest thing. I had to do a number of things. I was going to chiropractors. I was doing a whole bunch of stuff because I just didn't want a surgery. And everyone's like, well, that's crazy. Just get the surgery and it'll be fixed. And I'm like, I don't think you understand. There's other nerve damages other than my wrist that's caused the wrist. So it's like going all the way it went all the way down through my neck, all the way down into my arm. So it's more than just like a simple surgery with that. But I mean, the way that I fixed it is going back to traditional artwork. I noticed that I handle things lighter. I do things more purposefully, not, oh, I can just go back and delete that.
Right.
Yeah.
So there is like a more of a process of, you can't just go in and try to plow all this through. And if you make a mistake, you can just hit an undo button. You have to have a meaning. You have to have a purpose. When you're doing when you're doing traditional artwork, that is sort of taken away from when you're doing digital.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, when you're doing digital and traditional hybrids, you kind of have that same mentality when you're doing it. Like, if I'm not happy with something, yes, I can undo it, but then I'm making it so that I don't have to do it like a second or a third time.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, that's where I'm at right now, currently.
Yeah, I actually kind of want to jump on what you just said. I think one of the advantages of knowing traditional is it improves your digital.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to teach like an intro to Photoshop class and then a couple like advanced digital art classes at LCAD. And one of the things I would always try to kind of, when I was critting like students when they first did digital paintings, was like they looked like digital paintings. And my critique would always be like, you know, you need to work like more flat, like less gradients, less like, you know, less like lens flare kind of look to the whole thing, because that looks digital and it doesn't look like a good painting. And the weird thing is, if you approach a digital painting in the same way you would approach a traditional painting, it looks like 20,000 times better, because you're building it like you're figuring out like, okay, what's my medium? If it's oil, then you're going to work from like dark to light, right? You know, you're going to build it up and you're going to kind of build it in an intentional way. And that'll inform your brush strokes and your shapes, and thinking in shape as opposed to like just noodling every little like rendered detail on it. And like when people would approach, when the students would then approach it like more like they would approach an actual painting, their digital paintings would look 20 times better. Yeah. So it's this weird thing where it's like, if you don't know how to paint, like traditionally, you're going to have trouble digitally painting.
Yeah.
You know? If you know how to digitally paint well, if you switch to traditional, it probably wouldn't be too bad. You know, it's kind of a weird thing where like a lot of the same skills apply. Same with inking. You know, it's like if you learn the pressure to use with a brush, it's very similar with a Wacom, you know? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So I always recommend people start and really get down traditional, because it's never going to hurt, because the software will change, but the traditional media will always kind of stay the same, and the software is all emulating the traditional stuff, you know? Yeah.
And as far as like digital goes, that's one thing that I'm kind of surprised with, is that all the different software programs people are using. Like you said, you use Procreate, Pepper, and I've heard people, or Josh, Corey, was he use like Autodesk or something, or what is it? You know what that is that he uses? He uses a different one on his iPad, I think.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. I do own it. I don't like it as much.
Okay.
I mean, it's good. It is good. I just it's not the one that I felt is the best for me. And that's the other thing is when you're digitally doing stuff, you have to find a specific you have to find the programs that work.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I know you're saying like Paint Clips. You're doing Clip Studio.
Right. Yeah.
And I've used it. and I do like it. I see the worth of it. I see what it's good for. I just don't do it.
Yeah, well, I was talking to Gazbot about that too, and he was saying that he had tried to use Clip Studio, and because he was so used to Photoshop, he was just like, I'm just going to use Photoshop. But since I don't use Photoshop for drawing, I mean, I did some of my sketching and everything with this book in Photoshop because I was kind of hesitant to move over to a program I didn't know. But once I did all those, and I started just dropping some of my rough sketches in Clip Studio, and then I started going over them and getting the feel for it. For me personally, I think it's got a way better like brush engine than Photoshop personally, and just because it's designed for drawing comics. I mean, it's just a lot of the stuff I can do in this, and I haven't even scratched the surface. I mean, there's, you know, I know a lot of what it can do. I haven't figured out how to do that yet, but so hopefully, you know, just the fact that I'm starting with Clip Studio instead of trying to transition from another program, that I think it's going to be beneficial for me. But, you know, whether it's, you know, like Procreate, and I know like Clip Studio is now there's a portable version or a mobile version, but I guess it's like it's a subscription fee, it just seems weird because the Clip Studio, I mean, I think I've got the deluxe version. I think I don't know if it's the EX or whatever, I don't know, but I got it on sale. They were running like a crazy sale a while ago, and they're still using the same version. Like some programs, they put out new versions all the time, but it seems like their Clip Studio, it takes them a while to put a new one. So I've had this software that I got some crazy sale, and you know, I got it years ago, and I'm still kind of using it. I mean, just now using it, but the mobile version, the Clip Studio, I guess it's, you know, it's subscription based, so it just seems weird that where like you can get a version of Clip Studio for like $50, which is pretty reasonable for a desktop software, but then that, I guess they get you with the mobile version. So I don't know if I'll get to that point where, I mean, if I end up really liking it, maybe I'll do that if I get an iPad, but I want to try some of these other
Right.
check these other programs out. So and I know Photoshop is supposed to have a mobile version coming out soon. I don't know, you know, it's supposed to be, I know they have a mobile version now, but they're supposed to have actual Photoshop. I don't know how well that's going to go, because it's just gotta be different because people use mobile devices differently. So I don't know.
Yeah, I have both the Photoshop and the Drawing Illustrator program.
Mm-hmm.
So the vector Photoshop one. I tried both of them. I really do like Photoshop for a lot of things, especially if I have the digital color. It's perfect for me. That's what I like using, because it's the most methodical thing that's in my brain that I can do. However, trying to use those, they don't work the same as the computer version.
Right.
And I know they're for sketching and everything like that. And I've seen the amazing things that people have been able to do with those apps. I'm just not able to really get those details that some of those other people can get with those two specific programs. And I'm not saying that anyone else can't. I'm just saying that I can't. It doesn't work for my workflow. Yeah,
and that's one thing that I've noticed. You know, when I've like borrowed an iPad from somebody or whatever, and it's just so difficult learning a new software because you're used to doing something a certain way, and so I mean, and that's probably why it's taken me, because I've had attempts, because I was looking for a video because somebody had asked me about how to do something, and I remember I had an old video on how to do this, and so I'm looking back through my old videos so I can send it to them, and I went through some of my previous 100 days, and I noticed when I first started this issue, I started off doing it in Clip Studio, and I was using some of the perspective tools, but just by the nature of it, because at that point I was working I was working in an office, so I was doing a lot of my 30 minutes a day. I was doing on my lunch hour, and it was just too hard to, I mean, I was going to say another plus with traditional is that you can take it anywhere. But now with mobile devices, you can probably do that too if you have access to those too.
Yeah.
But and then of course traditional is if money's an option, then traditional might be the way to go too, because what does it cost for paper and ink and stuff? Not a whole lot. So that's another pro for traditional, I guess.
I can attest to that. Like some of my supplies that like someone's like, you dropped how much on watercolor paints? What?
Well, okay. So I guess if you're working at some art supplies can get quite expensive, traditional.
Oh yeah.
But compared to the investment in like a computer that you can do all this stuff, or a tablet or whatever. So, but I guess I'm just thinking comics, and because I work in black and white, I'm narrowing it down to just pen and ink for the most part, and paper. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, watercolors can get expensive, and watercolor paper is very expensive. So, yeah,
I can attest to that. It is. I mean, when you do that stuff and you're committed to it, you know what? I hear a whole bunch of people that are like doing advice tutorials, everything on YouTube, Instagram, whatnot. They all start out with like, your media is what you're using. It doesn't matter what you're going to do with it. It's how you use it and how you work with it that's going to make people notice you. My thing is if you do a side-by-side comparison, if you like working only in like student grade quality art materials for traditional art, and then all of a sudden one day someone buys you like a professional art set of watercolors or oil paints or whatever type of media that you've been using for such a long time, and you start using them, and then all of a sudden there's like a light bulb that hits you, like a Mack truck.
Yeah.
There is a huge difference between these materials. Why is there? And like even now, like I'm actually in the middle of learning on how to actually make watercolors myself.
Oh, okay.
So like I can get even better understanding of how this stuff is made, how it's processed, all of that stuff. And it's been really nice because I've been doing like these custom colors for like palettes and stuff like that. And I'm focusing mainly on skin tones because I don't have like mixes, or like I have like these people that I like drawing in my mind, and I'm like, well, not all of them are the same color. So like I've been sitting there just taking like other colors and making these like making them after like wetting my brush and stuff like that. In which case, like for the most part, if you're on the flip side, like when you're doing this digitally, you can sit there and go and take a picture of a person that has a similar skin tone that you're trying to find, and you can basically color dot, take that color and put it onto your image. With traditional, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You just can't, and it's like, and it kills me because it's like it's nice that you can, but when you do that traditional artwork and you want that feeling and you want to make it seem like you just plucked it off a real person's skin and put it on paper. Again, any media that you're trying to do it with, it could be rather difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, but let me chime in there too. Yeah. It's like the thing that's nice about learning traditional though with that is like what you learn with mixing color in paint. Like if you get really good at mixing color in paint, then when it comes to just like figuring out a really good mix of CMYK or like, a good hue saturation slide or whatever to get the right color, you'll be that much better digitally. because you'll know like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. This color needs a little more cyan. This color needs just a little bit more brown or burnt umber. Like you're going to know that intuitively from doing it traditionally. And so digitally, you'll be able to get more accurate colors than just eye dropping a photograph, which is really cool. So like one of the things I love, like one of my favorite colorists, Dave Stewart, he started back in the day where it was like color charts, you know, where they'd like list, I don't think it's CMYK back then. It was like another 4-color process. Yeah. But you would list the percentages of each color, you know, and then they'd watercolor the fill, so or gouache the fill, and or you know use like cell shading, and basically like have a line from it like this color is this breakdown. Yeah. And like what's interesting is if you look at a lot of the colorists who came from that time who adapted to digital, their color is so much better because they're doing the same thing just digitally. So they'll do like literal just CMYK breakdown numbers. And they know that like if I do 100 or sorry, if I do 0, 95, 100 and 0, then I've got a really nice like retro red that's like almost orange, you know? Yeah. And it's like you know that like just off the top of your head, and part of that's from doing it traditionally. So like I still recommend like getting the gist of like of traditional, because like there's a lot of things that I'll see kind of amateur artists do when they first take on digital painting or digital coloring, where their colors will look really muted and they're frustrated because their color doesn't look really vibrant. And then you just eye drop their color and there's like 20% black in the color. And it's like, well, that's why your color looks muddy. It's because you're mixing black. You never do that traditionally. Why would you do it digitally? The only color you mix black with is red, you know? And it's like that's traditional rule and that's a digital rule. And like, or you're mixing too much white with your colors, so they're getting washed out and blown out. Right. And to me, it's really cool to kind of, when you translate the two, I think a good digital colorist and a good traditional colorist are like one and the same. It's interesting to learn, but it's like the thinking's the same, you know? Yeah. But you're right in the sense that it's like it's harder to arrive at a color when you're mixing paint, you know? But then there's something really beautiful about that, like because it makes you kind of stick with a color and modify it and kind of work with it. Yeah. And like to me, like one of my biggest problems with digital is I'll do like the eternal zoom, you know, where it's like you can't, like, you know, when I'm working here, it's like I can't get like a microscope and like get into like fine tiny little details. There's like a limit to the amount I can zoom in. Digitally, there's not, so I can find myself like adding way too much. Do you guys struggle with that with digital?
So back in, I went to school. No, it's okay. So I went to school for graphic design, and because I wanted to do commercial art, and apparently they don't teach commercial art. They changed at the school I went to. They said it was graphic design, so that's what I went for. At one point, I actually got a hold of one of those books that had color codes. Yeah. So I was working off of those for a lot of my projects, which was very helpful because it gave me well, for one end, it gave me a false sense of security because I felt like those codes could just, you know, could help me more than actually me sitting there and trying to figure it out myself. But yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. Color codes are interesting. I mean, Pantones are still a good thing to learn because they're still used a lot. But like CMYK breakdowns, it's fun, man. I love the whole science of it. It's a weird thing. I get obsessive about it. I'll make sure there's at least 5% difference in my CMYK numbers, because this is a long time ago. But I found that if there's not 5% variation in color, it doesn't show up in print very well. And so like I always would try to just make sure that whatever color I arrive at, I'm going to round it by 5s. It's nuts. But I love digital coloring, which is funny because I'm mostly working in black and white now. But Scott, do you have that problem of like the eternal zoom on digital?
I try not to zoom in too much because of that, because I know I mean, I'm just now starting to do kind of the sketching and everything digitally. Like before, when I was just doing the lettering, I mean, that really wasn't an issue. If I was just doing lettering or coloring, but for drawing, that definitely can be an issue. But I try not to zoom in too much. So I just, I really make an effort to try to avoid that. So I haven't run into that so much yet. But yeah, because that can affect, your line weights and everything too. I mean, there's just, So, I mean, I also try not to put too much detail in. I mean, because of just the way I work, it's very much sort of a kind of a line art style. So I think if you aren't naturally going after that really detailed look, sometimes you can avoid sort of that zoom in, because if you really want to you can get super detailed by zooming in a lot. But yeah, so I don't know. For me, so far it's not too big of a problem, but we'll see. We'll see as I get more into it. There's a comment that I was going to read. I'd rather be drawing, which I believe is Scott. It says, I always thought that the term starving artist didn't have anything to do with whether or not you sold anything. It's just because our tools are so damn expensive. Peter Palmiotti says, preach. So that's good.
No, it's funny too, because I feel like when I first started really taking on like traditional inking, I was like most people, where I was like, screw all these guys who are saying you need like a Series 7. That's like $100. I'll take a Sharpie and I'll just do my art with like Sharpies and like Bic pens. And then months later, I'm like, these pens keep drying up and they're kind of crappy. Like they last for about a minute and then they're dead. And so I'm like, I don't know, maybe I should use maybe I should use better ink, and like it's weird, because I've always found that like most people, when they're working traditionally, they'll like kind of start like in the direction of like the opposite direction of how the masters did it. And then the longer they're at it, the more they just start edging more and more towards what all the old guys were doing in the first place. It's a weird thing I've noticed,
Yeah, but I still believe that you don't. I mean, if you can afford the more expensive stuff, I'm sure you're probably going to like it a lot better. But I wouldn't let that be a something to hold you back, because I've seen brilliant people like that guy, the box office artist. Have you seen his stuff?
The box office artist?
Yeah. So he's got a YouTube channel. I forget his name. Anyway, but he does all this really, I think he does comic work he did comic work for like Transformers and stuff like that. So he's got all these, and he does likenesses really well too, but he's got all these really technical like Transformer drawings, and he does a lot of that with Sharpies. And I'm like, I mean, you can't argue with the work. I mean, it's great, but I keep saying that stuff is not going to hold up, stand the test of time. And I'm thinking anyone that he sells an original piece to is going to be pretty upset, 20 years from now when that starts to turn blue or green or whatever, because it's done with Sharpies. But it's whatever. If that's what you're comfortable with too, I wouldn't.
Oh yeah, and also if you're starting out, like I wouldn't bother investing in like a Series 7, because you might just destroy it in like a week. And then
it seems like they're cheaper now, because last time I bought a Series 7, it wasn't like a large. I use pretty small detail brush, but it was more in the range of like $30 or $40, which is still expensive, but it's not hundreds. So
nice. It might be because I think I'm forgetting what size I use a what is this? I don't even know what this. Oh, a 2. So I like to use a 2, but I know a lot of artists like to use like 001s and stuff.
But yeah, I mean, if you look online, I think you could find them a little less expensive. So
I'm gonna have to peek, man.
What do you use, Pepper, for brushes for watercolor?
So for brushes, this is just a plain old ordinary brush I got in a pack.
All right.
I mean, for brushes, I just pick up whatever feels great. I mainly use a number 6.
Okay.
Pointed number 6 so that I can get finite details, and then I could do bigger things. And then if I'm doing a bigger piece, I'll use bigger brushes for background, stuff like that. And then I'm usually with, once I'm done with the 6, I'm back in there with like a 1, a 2, and a 4. For smaller details. I mean, it goes back to like what you're comfortable with, like what you're wanting to do. Like, I really like Pentel's brush pen.
Yeah, I was using that for a while, and I switched over to a Fude pen. I forgot which one it is. It's Zebra maybe, but yeah, I like the brush pocket brush.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
But I've actually discovered Kiritaki's.
Yeah, I've got one of those too. Yeah, there's a couple that I use, and I don't know. The Kiritaki might actually be better, but for whatever reason, I just keep using this other pen. It's a cheaper pen, but I don't even know if I have it around here. But yeah, maybe not.
But I saw. So let me just go grab it real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So while Pepper does that, let me check the chat and see what's going on.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So it's the Zebra pen, and I'm not sure if it's Tombow or Kiritaki. I'll try to.
You know what? I've got one like that, but I think mine's gray. Let's see.
Yeah, so I have the gray one as well. This one is said to be better. It's archival, and this one also has it's waterproof, so I can use it with watercolors.
Oh, nice.
When I did the test initially, though, you can't use the watercolors right away with this. Like you have to let it sit.
Yeah, I think that's good advice for because I've noticed some of my pen, like with markers too, sometimes you got to wait or else they will smudge. But I think this is the Kiritaki that I've got. I like this one. But this one here is the one I've been using, and I don't know what it is. I know it's like a Fude pen, but it's in Japanese, so I don't know what it's. I think it's maybe a Zebra. I don't know. It's got 2 tips on it. I don't use the. I don't use
that looks like one of the Tombows.
It looks like a Tombow, but I don't think it's a Tombow. No.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. I mean, both of them, both Tombow and Kiritaki, I believe, the Zebra pens are definitely made in Japan.
Yeah.
So, there's the guy that draws with his kids. Like he's an anime. He's a cartoonist over in Japan. He's French, and he married, had 2 kids, and so his kids do drawings, and that's on how I discovered this guy.
Okay. Yeah, I've used like the gray one. I've used, and I thought I had one, but I must have used it up. So I'm gonna have to get new ones because I'm afraid my other one's gonna. I've been doing these zombie sketches here. I'll show you. I'm gonna start posting these tomorrow to promote my Kickstarter coming up next month. But I did this with just that brush pen. So.
Okay. Cool.
So and Copic markers too. So.
Gotcha.
So my wife uses like watercolor stuff, but it's like, and I'm gonna get it all mixed up because I barely ever use it anymore. But I think the brushes she uses are like Da Vinci, and they're kind of pricey. But I swear to God, like you use one, and it's like it is one of those moments of like being like, oh, this is like, because I remember when I was learning, I used like those Princeton, like those really cheap ones, you know. And then you use one of those and it's like you do a wash and it's just beautiful and perfect. And you're like, oh, that's why. And she has like a big mop brush, which are like, it's crazy. They're like $60 brushes, but it's like, it looks like a giant mop. And that thing is amazing for like just doing if you lay like what you do wet on wet with like a wash. And then, but it's crazy. Like watercolor goes up there because like if you get the blocks, like the Arches blocks, like those are really expensive, but they're really good. They handle paint well. It's just like it's a whole spectrum, I guess it's kind of like inking. You can get like, to me, I stick to like I forget what it is. I think it's just 300, or maybe I can't remember. It's the 300 series bristle, but there's this other series of bristle called 600. And I've inked on it a few times, and when I've done it, it's been like one of those moments of like, oh, I should always ink on this. But it's like $60 for a pad. I'm not going to pay $60 for a pad of paper when I'm burning through like one of these every 2 months, Yeah.
You guys are making me miss watercolor. I used to love watercolor. I haven't used it in so long, but I got this set. I think Jake Parker was talking about this set here, but I got this set. But I only used it once, but I really want to get back to it.
I actually have it myself, and I have the metallic set.
Oh, cool. Now, do you use the metallic for comics? Because I mean, that can't reproduce very well, can it?
No. So if you use metallic watercolors, actually any type of metallic type of overlay, you want to have it like if you're doing it for prints and you want to do like some type of hand custom thing on top of the prints, I would recommend getting like a metallic ink. I have a gold mica ink that I'll use on occasion if I really wanted to. I haven't really gotten one that I like the effect of, so I won't sell it. But what I find is if you're doing a watercolor piece and you want to do metallics in it, you do it after you scan it in and you don't have it in the piece, but then like say I'm doing a gold. Well, I'll put like a gold color right there, and then I'll go back in and I'll put the gold right on top of where that gold piece is.
Smart.
Because then it's just going to make that metallic thing like be more noticeable.
Yeah.
Want in a good way.
Yeah, I was just talking to my comic store owner about some ideas for Kickstarter, and I forgot there's a term for it. I forgot what they're calling it, but it's where imprint, or no, it wasn't imprint. It was something else where you actually draw like just a little. It's basically like a sketch on the cover, like a real. But there's a name. There's a term for it now. But he was talking about doing stuff like that. But that would be the perfect time to use sort of metallic. And like you said, because I know, like with Magic cards and stuff, they'll do these paint overs and everything. But that would be kind of a cool thing if you just had, kind of went over, like if you're a Magic artist or whatever, you kind of went over certain things with sort of metallic, because that's something you can't get with printing unless you're, unless it's an actual like a Pantone or like a spot color or varnish or something like that.
Working in the printing world, I can say that doing silver, there's some companies out there that do like silver and gold overlay printing, and they charge a phenomenal amount of money, and it raises those print costs for the artists exponentially.
Yeah.
And I mean, it works. It can work out really great, and I know in recent years it's gotten more affordable for people who do print work and stuff like that. I just, from my point of view, I still like having that hand done aspect on top of it for some weird reason. Maybe I'm just weird, but like.
No, that's cool, because it also makes something one of a kind, whereas before if it's just a print. So I mean, I like that.
Yeah, and you can still do that same method and get, like, you could sit there and try to say, oh, I'm just trying to reproduce this the same way every single time, but two people can walk up and see two different prints and they're like, these aren't the same.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, you can still have a bunch of prints and still do it, and you still won't get the same effect twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the limited availability of each version makes like a higher perceived value, you know, because it creates rarity for it, you know.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy. I love like metallics, like especially, you know, foil press like is so pretty, but it's like so expensive.
Well, and I guess that goes back into the difference between digital and traditional inking, or traditional in general.
Yeah.
It's those two things, because you pay a lot for that digital piece to have that metallic, and you can't do it on screen.
Yeah.
So sorry for interrupting him.
No.
Now, metallics and neons are one of the main arguments against digital, because it's like your screen still can't do neon and it still can't do metallic. So all that can happen.
Well, I mean, what are you gonna do? Like, you can't really. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm. So okay, so like why hybrid? Like why switch it up? Like what makes you pick digital for one thing and hybrid for another? And then like tying into your hundreds comic, like what like why did you choose to approach it the way you're approaching it?
So I'll go first. So for me, like I think one of the main reasons a lot of people go towards digital is just expediency. I mean, a lot of times it's faster. And for this comic that I'm working on right now, that's why I'm doing all the sketching and the layout and everything digitally, except for the thumbnails, because I can thumbnail faster. And that would kind of go back to your earlier question about the zoom.
Yeah.
And I kind of forgot about that when I was doing thumbnails. That's something where that could be a problem, because you don't want those thumbnails to be super detailed. You just want a quick sketch. So that's why I work actual size. I mean, not actual size, but thumbnail size, and just traditional for that, because I don't want that ability to zoom in and everything when I'm doing thumbnails. So for that, I use traditional, and then all the sketching, everything I'm doing digitally. But then I'm going to print it out and I'm going to ink it traditionally, because I know, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, if you are experienced with or traditionally inking, I just think it's faster. I think inking is faster traditionally, because, and you can see this anytime you see almost any digital inker work on their pages. It's like they make a line and then they undo, and then they make a line, because it's not perfect. And sometimes it takes them 5 or 6 times to get that line right. Whereas if you're working traditionally, as long as you're used to it and you have a steady enough hand and you're familiar with traditionally inking, it's one line, and that's pretty much it. Maybe it's not as perfect as if you've swiped like 6 or 7 times till you get that perfect one, but for me, the inking is a lot faster to do traditionally, at least right now. Maybe if I start doing more digitally inking, and that might not be the case for like borders or like things that are very technical, because those things, maybe if you want that to look perfect, if you're using a ruler traditionally, a lot of that's going to take you a lot more time. But as far as just if you're working on a comic that takes place out in the wilderness and it's just people and organic things, definitely, I mean, I think traditionally it's going to be a lot faster. So we'll see when I get into, because I've got a lot of like backgrounds and it takes place in a suburban neighborhood. So there's going to be a lot of things I got to rule out. So that stuff may take a little longer, but I still think it's going to be faster for me to ink traditionally. So that's kind of why I'm doing that part traditionally versus everything else digitally. What about you, Pepper?
So I'm kind of like the flip side of that. Whereas inking traditionally, it may take me longer, but I do ink faster digitally.
Okay.
It's just for some reason. I don't necessarily always have to hit undo unless there's something seriously wrong with the way that I think it looks.
Right.
Now, if I did that in traditional artwork and I didn't like on how it came out, here comes the whiteout.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be realistic. There is a way to actually correct your mistake with in traditional media. It's just if you're doing it that way, don't expect to be using don't do that on watercolor paper. Do it on something like that.
Watercolor is the least forgiving medium, I think.
I mean, oil, yeah, you can do that, but you don't want to do that on paper very often. I've never really found a paper that really works for oil, but I'm not an oil paint artist.
I think most commercial artists or people, just because of the dry time and everything, I mean, mixing, I'm sure oil is probably the best as far as mixing. Maybe not. I mean, watercolor too, but
if you ever work in oil or you're working in acrylic, like really thick, not a very transparent, I really recommend doing it on board, and not board like the canvas boards, because those usually look pretty cheap, but like doing it on actual wood. So like MDF is like a really cheap option that if you gesso it, you can like build a little frame, and it literally costs like maybe $2 for a giant sheet at Home Depot that you can cut into little squares, and it has like a crazy high perceived value, and it looks beautiful, and it works. It takes paint really well as long as you gesso it really well.
Acrylic or oil or both or what?
Oil or acrylic if you're working opaquely.
Okay.
So like because acrylic kind of works like oils. It just has a fast dry time, and it's a little more rubbery. But it's like if you're working in either of those, like I really recommend working on board. It's so addictive once you do it. Like you never want to go back. And you can actually gesso on board too, but I don't know a lot of people who use gesso anymore because it just doesn't lay as smooth as acrylic. But it is pretty.
Squatchy Ink says that he uses acrylics. So
nice.
No, and I've seen the people that do the boards though. I mean, and it is. I've watched the processes. There's something about watercolor. It keeps drawing me back.
Yeah, I love watercolor too. I don't blame you. I mean, I really do want to get back into it, yeah, getting back to the comic, the reason why I'm doing the anthology the way that I am is I just felt that it would be better if I did the washes by hand for this one. I did a lot of this stuff digitally. I did the pencils that I initially did. I did by hand, and because I can do the penciling off digital much faster, and then my digital inks are faster than my traditional inks, and and then my washes are gonna just take me no time at all. So that's why I go back and forth predominantly.
Nice.
Yeah, I haven't decided. Maybe I wonder if maybe I should do some washes. I up until now I just kind of assumed that this would just be straight black and white line art. But I mean, like my regular comic, Young and the Dead, I mean I do it digitally, but it is grayscale. But for whatever reason, I was just thinking this was going to be just black and white line art. But I don't know. Maybe I should think about maybe even doing some watercolor washes. But I'll have to wait and see. Yeah.
You can also just do a test page.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. Yeah.
Just do an update and say, hey, I did this test page. I think I'm just going to go back with my initial thought. Or this looks great. I'm going to do the next 3 pages. You never know. It's just, it's one of those things of, that I got told a lot, like when I was learning the processes of how to do things art-wise. You just have to try it. You have to know if you like it. Once you know you like it or you're going to like it, continue with it. If you give up on it right away, you're going to lose that building block of loving that type of traditional artwork that you're going to do. And the same thing goes with digital. I mean, I know this is supposed to be traditional or digital versus traditional type deal, but at this point, I think everyone's saying, probably has noticed that we're talking about the comparisons of our own work.
Yeah.
Between each two, and what works for one person does not always work for another, and sometimes it actually does work for two people, and that's what you have to boil it down to. Yeah,
and just like what you said, where you're faster digitally inking, whereas I'm the opposite. So it's just you really do have to just test things out and see what works the best for you. But I still think it's really important, because I mean, there's, especially nowadays, there's people that's kind of maybe all they've ever known was digital. So I mean, it's and I still think there's such value to doing things traditionally as well. So I don't know. I mean, I think you know, if you're used to just doing one way, and it's the same thing with people that only do traditional, and I know a lot of people like that too. You know, it might be nice to kind of give it a shot too. So
yeah, I mean, I will say, like, just as a, you know, I was jokingly going to be like doing devil's advocate. This is definitely not devil's advocate. This is just my opinion. But I always prefer the finished product as traditional. And this is just my own thing, but it's like, I know that I always talk about Chris Ware on here, but there was like this big moment where I was reading his art. It kind of looks like something that was made in Illustrator, because it's a pretty continuous line, and it's a lot of shapes. And then I realized it was all done manually, like by hand. And it's so clean you'd barely notice, except you see the two tine lines of like a ruling pen. And then seeing original pages of his like in galleries right next to like R. Crumb, who, like, it's funny, a lot of, like, even before seeing that, I always thought he worked really sloppy. And then I see his inks in person, and I'm like, this guy is like a master inker. Like, his inks are so crisp and polished. And it's like, you'd think they'd be like chaotic and just messy. And it's like, no, it's like the cleanest inking you've ever seen on original pages. And you look at like Will Eisner's The Spirit, and you see where he like worked out the typed, like the stacked letters of like the word spirit, like made out of stone and stuff. Yeah. And there's something really mind-blowing about that I don't get from digital art. And it doesn't mean I don't appreciate digital art. And I do a lot of digital art. Like tonight I have to do revisions on a digital drawing I did for a client, you know, and I did it digitally because it was fast. But it's like, but I there is something to be said for like, I do change my own perspective when I see that something was done by hand. It's a weird thing. It like clicks in my head as like more impressive. And I don't know why that is. It might be my generation, but I do think, like, you know, for like resale value after you're done with a comic, like I don't want to buy a print of your page as much as I want to buy the original, you know? And like, I might pay like $10 for a print of your page, $20 or something like that. But like, you know, if you give me like an original page, you're talking like hundreds, you know? So it's like, it's hard to say, but like for me, I value it more in a weird way. I hope that's not unpopular.
No, I remember the first time I saw like originals. There was this gallery that sold comic book art, and I went in there, and I didn't know what it was at first. I thought it was a comic book store, but I go in and they've got all these original pages on the wall, and you get up there and you see all the paste ups and you see all the whiteout, and you're like, oh my God, wow. The you know, these guys like make mistakes and they cover them up, and you just don't see that when you're just seeing the printed work. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was just opened up a whole new world for me. And not only that, but I think that was the first time I actually saw, you know, what size, you know, because I was always drawing comics at actual size, and I didn't realize that people, you know, that you draw them bigger, you know, you scale them up and everything. So yeah, it's and that's another, you know, that's another pro for you know, for traditional, is that you got that original artwork. And even like for me, even though all this stuff I'm doing is all the sketching and everything is digital, but if I print it out and ink it, then I still have a nice piece, you know. Mm-hmm. I don't know, that's something too. So
yeah. So are you doing it like, so when you guys do it on digitally, like when you're digitally doing the comics, are you working to the scale of traditional, or are you working to actual scale of print?
Well, when I print this out, I'm going to print it out at 11 by 17.
Okay.
So your typical size that most comic artists work at, unlike Josh, who works like 3 times that big. but yeah, it's weird working. That's another thing that's weird working digitally, because it's like, you know, I guess you could go way smaller and bump up your DPI or whatever, or you can, because I think my stuff's overkill, because I'm like, I think Young and the Dead, I think I'm working at 300 DPI, but it's at like, but my digital files are at like 11 by 17, so it's probably doesn't need to be 300 DPI, or it probably doesn't need to be, you know, it doesn't need to be 11 by 17. So yeah, it's kind of that's a weird thing too, but I don't know.
I remember back in the day, like I ended up breaking a school computer because someone did a scan for me, and that they didn't tell me what they did the scan at. So I broke the computer because they did it at 1200 DPI.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I used to, you know, there were times where I did stuff at that high resolution, especially if it's line art. I mean, that doesn't need to be that high, but and it's a weird thing because like I used to, because well, what if we blow this thing up? But what I didn't realize, though, if you've ever seen a billboard, or if you've ever seen like a vehicle wrap, if you go right up to a vehicle wrap, up close, it is blurry. It's like they do that at like 72 DPI. I mean, most people don't see it up that close. And I have a friend who owns an acquaintance rather, that I went to high school with, who owns a huge company that does vehicle wraps. And I did this tour of his facility, and they were showing me that. I get up close. I'm like, oh wow. I'm like, how big are these files? And he goes, well, they're not that big because they're at like 72. I'm like, 72, but this is printed. But yeah, I mean, because you're not looking at it that close. It's not like a magazine where you're right up close. It doesn't need to be that high res. So.
Right. And I actually worked out. I tried to help someone out with a vehicle wrap at one point, and I sent the file that I was working on to kind of show like, hey, this is what we're trying to do right here. This is the model of the car. This is, you know, like I transposed everything. And they're like, so what's the file size that you're going to be sending us? And I was just like, well, I was going to send it to you at 300 DPI. And they're like, oh, well, that's very nice of you. Normally we only get like 72, 100, stuff like that. And these people like wrap, like they would wrap everything.
Yeah.
So, but you're correct. It's when I was doing the graphic design stuff, designing a billboard, you can still do it at 600 DPI, but like you're working on a scale that's 11 by 17 that's going to be blown up, put up, and then when you're looking at it from afar, it's going to look clean and crisp. But if you look up right up close, it's not.
Right. Yeah.
It's the joy of digital.
Yeah. So a friend of mine, actually a mutual friend, but I can't really say which park or anything like that, but he did a painting for a haunted mansion that was going to be in one of the haunted mansions in a country. And it's massive. It's like a wall-sized painting. And because it's Disney, they wanted it to be like perfect when you go right up to it. And so because it was out of the country, my friend had to digitally paint it in like sections as a grid because his computer would crash. So he had to do it in like all these like little 10 by 10 sections, and then send like 100 10 by 10 sections that they could then stitch together. And he was saying it was one of the hardest things he's ever had to work on, because it's just this massive digital painting that you have to do in little grids, you know. That sounds like a nightmare to me.
Like and even like when you're working in vectors, because I always assume, oh, vector is just all mathematic. You know, it's just an equation. That's not going to be a big file size, and a lot of times, most of the times it isn't. But I started working on some things that had all these like digital vector textures in it, like for my other job, and like that thing was just like, well, I guess I'm just sitting here and waiting for this thing to is it gonna crash my computer, because it was crazy. Yeah,
because the gradations, like you'll notice, like when you put like a drop shadow or something in Illustrator, for anybody like listening or whatever who's unfamiliar, if you put a drop shadow in, you have to actually set the DPI for the effect, because it's a raster effect on a vector graphic. And so that raster effect on a vector graphic just made your file twice as big.
Yeah.
So if you add 10 of those, it like just amplifies and amplifies and amplifies the load time and everything. And sometimes I'll get assets from clients where it's like, you know, you kind of, I forget what it is. It's like command click the eyeball to where you see all the lines and the structure, and it's just this web of nonsense, and you're like, well, who built this file?
Yeah, I don't even like to use those raster.
Oh no!
But I mean, like DKNG, they do that kind of stuff all the time, and their stuff's awesome. So I don't know, but yeah, who knows? We're kind of getting a little bit in the weeds, but I don't know. We probably should. I think we're getting close to the hour and a half kind of thing, so we want to start wrapping it up.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything anyone wants to add to the topic of digital, traditional kind of process or anything like that. Anything else you guys wanted to mention before we start wrapping it up?
I'm good.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So if you guys want to follow what all of us are doing on the 100 Days of Making Comics, you should go to the 100 Days. What's the Facebook group? The 100 Days, right? Or the hundreds? I don't remember what the name is. I check it every day.
Yeah, I know. I just don't know. Well, there's 100 Days Anthology.
The 100s, spelled with two E's, the 100s, the 100 Days of Making Comics Challenge. And if you just look up the 100s with two E's, it should pop up, and just join that group just to follow what everybody's doing in the hundreds.
Well, hold on because I kind of got trouble for that, because evidently I think in order for you to
you have to apply?
Group, I didn't get in trouble, but I was given wrong information. So
okay.
I think in order to join that group, you have to be taking the challenge, and I think you have to at least have a video or two up.
Okay.
You can submit, and then you can join. So
okay, so maybe don't join, but I think you.
Well, can you check? Here's another question: Can you look at the page? I don't know how Facebook pages work. Can you look at it and just not post? Or Mike kind of bailed. He had to go to bed or whatever. So.
I have no idea. We'll have to ask Mike tomorrow, but try to lurk on the hundreds and then blame me if it becomes a problem for Mike and the guys. But yeah, keep an eye on like everybody doing the hundreds. You can also just check it out on Facebook. Most people are like hashtagging, the 100s, and they're hashtagging werewolves and unicorns. So like if you look up those hashtags on Twitter or something like that, you can also check it out that way. But regardless, we're all updating. We're all in the same anthology, and it's definitely been cool to see what you've been working on, Pepper. It looks like you're close to done, which is crazy, at least with the inks. You're how far along are you?
The inks are done.
That's impressive, man. I don't know how you did that quickly. So that's cool. You have a fast page rate. And it's looking good. So I can't wait to see how those washes look when you add them. Thanks for joining us. And so let's just make the rounds. So Pepper, where can everybody find your work?
You can find me on Instagram as Pepper DeLuca, all one word. On Twitter, Pepper_DeLuca, and at Peppercopia. When you look up at Facebook, because Pepper DeLuca was taken, that's where you can find me.
Nice. Awesome. Thanks again for joining us, and check out Pepper's work. It's really good. All right. You know where to find me. You're on my YouTube channel. So if you haven't, hit subscribe and like and all that jazz. And then go to quarterlystories.com and read my autobio comic. And if you also want to be able to check it out on your Android or your iPhone or your iPad or your something, just go to topis.io and then search for Quarterly Stories, and you can add it there, and that helps me out a lot as well. Scott, I'm in the mood after all this talk about digital versus traditional. I really want some like free digital comic assets. Where would I go to get these free assets for my comic?
So you can go to circworks.com and you can pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It is totally free. Just go in there. There's a couple of different places that you can sign up for it on my homepage. And if you want to know how that works, you can go to my YouTube page, and I just put up a video, and I kind of gave a product tour and showed what all the stuff that's in it. Because I know there's still people on the fence like Pepper over here. But if you're curious what's in it, if you're kind of on the fence and you want to see what's in it, you can go check out that video, and you can see all the cool stuff you get with it. And I kind of show you how everything works. So head over to my YouTube page, and that's Circworks Art Labs, or just, I'm sure if you put Circworks in, it'll find it or populate it or whatever. But other than that, yeah, if you want to know, if you're unfamiliar with the Artcasters, how we do this thing, we do it every week, usually on Thursday. But it's usually on a different channel. Sometimes it's on my channel. Sometimes it's on Josh's channel. Sometimes it's on Josh's channel, and I'm running the show like when he's sick, even though he kind of pulled it around in the end.
Yeah.
So, but if you want to know exactly where we're going to go live and everything, the best way to do that is to join our mailing list. And we don't spam you or anything like that. We just send out usually about 30 minutes ahead of time a link to where you can find us online. I mean, where we're going to be, whose channel and all that, what time and all that kind of stuff. So there is a link to that in the description of this video.
Sweet. Thanks to everybody who joined in on the chats. It always makes it way more interesting when we hear you guys chiming in. So thanks again. And I think Keeman and Peter both said hi and that your work's awesome, Pepper. So yeah, we will see you guys next week.
Oh yeah, just one other thing before you hang up. Just also, anyone that is doing the challenge, we put a note out. Pepper's on today, but we want to get some other people that are doing that. So hit us up on Facebook or whatever if you want to come on the show. Just probably help if you have a decent mic and a decent webcam. But yeah, we'd like to get you guys on the show. So
sweet. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.